Would you share with us some of the speed bumps that you've had during your journey as an entrepreneur, and maybe some things that you learned from that?
I'd go back to one that was kind of off the cuff earlier. That was that one of over planning. That's going quite a ways back for me now. Like I said, it was around 20. That over planning, and I just continue to think it was a little bit fear-based. I really think people need to be very aware of any tendency to over-plan, any tendency to create perfection. What is the real reason behind that? You know, so many people say, I'm a perfectionist. Is it you're a perfectionist, or is it that you're fearful? I think you've got to be very, very aware of what's really going on there, and then you've got to fight that thing. In terms of other speed bumps, so that one I think is a big one. The other one that I would say a speed bump for me was that I was a partner in a company that was built on selling, more face-to-face, more, you entertain the client, you take the client out, you just spend money on the client, and everything's relationship-based. It was more traditional face-to-face type selling, and it was successful. Then when I tried to make the transition to a scenario where you couldn't sell face-to-face or it wouldn't build the most profitable, bigger business, and that you had to use marketing, that created a massive speed bump in my life, in that I copied what other people were doing, and I modeled what other people were doing, and I didn't get results. And in hindsight, I realized that I would have got results. They would have just been the same crappy results as everybody else in business gets. And that was a huge catalyst, probably one of the most important things that's ever happened in my life, was that drove me to start studying marketing. And man, I wish I had discovered it 10 years earlier. And so I started studying marketing, and the more and more and more I learned about marketing, it had an effect on my thinking about the onboarding process. It had an effect on which I don't usually like to use the word onboarding. It's the popular word, but the getting your client started process, or I kind of think of it as the welcome process, whatever you want to call it, or the implementation process. To most customers, onboarding is a meaningless word. It tends to be a technical word. But if you say onboarding to your typical customer, they don't have a faintest idea what you're talking about. So whatever you call that process, that was all my thinking on that was all affected based on my learning of marketing and learning of psychology. You can't really learn marketing without learning something about psychology. And you can't really be effective at marketing without really learning what the client cares about, what they want, what, as we say, their dream come true scenario is. What are their wants and needs and their fears? When you start to learn that stuff, you can't help but then take those things you learn and have those things affect the product or the service that you're delivering. You can't help but have it affect the getting started or implementation process. You can't help but have it affect the customer service experience. You can't help but have it affect what happens when they cancel service with you and the effort you go to try to save it and make it right. And marketing, for me, was the thing that opened up that door and taught me so much that it affected, most guys just think, oh, yeah, I learned marketing, it affects bringing in new clients. I say no, marketing affects every single thing about every other element of your business, all the way down to how you hire employees, how you go attract employees. Everybody complains there's not enough people, not enough workers. Well, why don't you apply marketing to your employee problem? Marketing affects everything. And so that was a massive speed bump in my life, probably the great speed bump. Thank goodness I had it, because then it forced me to go learn marketing. So that's one. That's two. See if I can. A third one would probably have to do with money, cash flow. So I remember very distinctly a business partner in mid-2000 area, early 2000s, in one of our businesses. Cash flow was tight. Everybody basically in the commercial world would invoice at the end of 30 days, hope it paid in 60. And maybe 90, and that's the way it was. That's the way it was for everybody. And he said, why do we have to do it this way? And I very clearly remember pushing back and saying, because everybody does it this way. It's always stuck in my mind. I don't know why this one thing stuck in my mind. And I was emphatic that, no, this is how the entire industry does it. If we want to compete, we have to do it this way. And I operated under that kind of thinking with so many things. And then I think going back to marketing, you start to learn things and you think, I can act different, be different, I can run things the way I want. And then you start thinking about creating a company. You think, you know what, I started this freaking business. I'm going to create and craft the business that I want. Who says I have to operate under some paradigm of the industry? And that kind of thinking had then an effect on cash flow. And the way it had an effect on cash flow is I said, wait a second, if we know how to market and talk and educate the client, might we be able to build a client a different way? And so what happened is in every business since, we have billed differently. And in that business too, we build differently. I'll give you an example. In that business, historically, it was that scenario. You bill after 30 days, you get paid in 60 to 90, and we changed that entire model with they were public companies, they were big, massive corporations, changed the entire model, and we billed weekly. Nobody billed weekly. It wasn't my idea, it was my business partner's idea, and he was dead on right. And that learning experience for me then applied it to every other business I've owned since. And if you don't clean up cash flow in your business, it'll be the massive bottleneck that slows down growth. And so hopefully that wasn't too much information there, Andrew, but those would be three massive bottlenecks that I think just play a huge role in business success.
Great, Jonathan. Let's talk a little bit about work-life balance, because I think really the key to having a fulfilled life is balancing our passions for work and our business, building great businesses, and the passion that we have about loving life and building a great life with our friends, our family, our children, and all that entails. So what has been key to your ability to juggle the time-consuming life as an entrepreneur, growing a very large organization with having a wife and two kids?
So it's been an up and down road. You know, the whole life balance thing, I don't totally buy into it. I think that, because I think the dream of the life balance scenario is one where it's kind of a smooth selling scenario. Every week, I'm kind of balancing my time between family and business, and it's just kind of this constant flow through the course of a year, through the course of months and of life, where everything's kind of in balance and in harmony. And I think the reality of work-life balance is there's seasons. There's a season where you work your ass off and you work really hard and things are out of whack to some degree. And then there's the flip side where there's a season where, we have a little more time and the family gets a little more time. And what I mean by that is this dream of I'm going to work 40 hours a week and the rest of the time's with my family. Well, there are some weeks when you've got to travel and you're kind of working the whole week and the family's sort of getting ignored, and then you're back on the weekend. Or you're working on a massive project to greatly move the company forward, and it's 2 months of hard work and we're working our butt off for 2 months. Yeah, the family doesn't get their fair share of time, but then on the flip side, the work kind of recedes and the family gets more time. And so I think it's ebbs and flows. I believe that. I mean, I just don't see there's so many guys selling the dream, but the guys that are really successful don't seem to be following that exact model. So I think and I want to be careful here on how I say that, because the dream is real. I'm just saying that if and Andrew, you're a perfect example. I mean, you do a lot of traveling, you're going to do a lot of great stuff. And I historically, there was a time that we were doing about 6 vacations a year. Well, when we started Service Autopilot, that all went out the door because I really needed a couple years of just work. The only alternative was to put a lot more money in the company. But at the same time, I wasn't so bothered by that because this was my passion. I mean, we had a goal, and the objective was to get Service Autopilot going and make it successful. And so I gave up some stuff. Now, the vacation stuff is all now resumed. But there was a period of time where I gave it up, and it's kind of the example of the ebb and flow. I just don't think people should beat themselves up if for a season you're working a little bit harder because you're trying to do some big launch, you're trying to start a new company, you're doing something. But I think you, as much as possible, have to create some level of, and I've been bad about this. A lot of stuff that I or anybody else talks about, a lot of times we're able to talk about it because we've screwed it up. And one thing that I'm very, very consistent about, because as Andrew said, I have a wife and 2 kids, is that I very consistently try to be home about 6:30 at night, and we eat dinner together. I know not everybody puts value in that, but we put value in that. And also, I don't work on Sunday, almost ever. And a lot of people think you're insane to work 6 days a week, but I really like what I'm doing, so I still continue to work 6 days a week most of the time. But there are times, like next weekend we're going to go to Lake House with some friends, and so I won't work that Saturday. So that's, again, an example of ebb and flow. Most of the time I work on Saturdays because I like it. We're getting ahead. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm living exactly what I want to do. But then there are other times where other things present themselves, and you back off of your normal plan. So I think that you have to have some level of structure, though, if you are going to work a ridiculously busy schedule. If you're working a ridiculously busy schedule, though, just for the sake of it, just for the heck of it, then that's a miserable existence. I think you've got to be doing it because it's what you really, really want to be doing. And in my case, that's the scenario. And the way that we've handled it is by putting some hard rules in place that, I am home for dinner at nights, and we do go out every Friday and Saturday night. It's very rare that we don't. And then on Sundays I don't work. So the rest of the time, I'll work my butt off. And then we do our vacations, and when I'm on vacation, I don't work. And so I think if you create structure, then you can work a lot of hours and really produce something big, but you have to have the structure. Otherwise, your life is just a disaster, because then all it is work.
I want to talk to you briefly about productivity. What would you tell somebody who's struggling to be more productive in their business?
I would study this concept. It's probably one of the more popular concepts, one of the more popular info products out there that people create and sell because everybody's trying to squeeze another minute out of their day. I actually think this is worth a study. So my advice would be to actually spend a little time on this. I think, if you were to sum up a couple things, and I've struggled with this, I feel like I'm pretty productive, but I also see areas of waste in my schedule. I would say that a couple just quick pointers. There's a book called by David Allen. I think it's called Getting Things Done. There's one theme in there that really resonates with me on that book, and it's the concept of the next action. And it's something I read that book years and years ago, and it's really been something I've been thinking about quite a bit here lately. I think it's an incredibly powerful point. If I was talking about how everything we're doing now is a project, and I've got a whole lot of things going on outside of work that have to get done, and I really have been making a very concerted effort to think about, in everything I've got to do, let's say I've got a project at the house that I need to get done, and so I need to get this thing done, and as soon as I finish whatever that task is, the whole project in and of itself isn't finished. What's my next action? And maybe let me try to explain a little better than what I was saying. What I mean by this is, so often we have this big project. The project is we have to launch our website. So let me go this direction instead. So we've got to launch a website. And so when you say to yourself that you've got to launch this website, it's such a big concept your brain can't get around. Your brain can't get around this thing. It doesn't know what to do next. So it's so easy to continue to put it off and put it off and put it off. And you don't actually take any action on it. But what if that project, this is basic project management, was broken down into a lot of very basic skills or little basic steps? What is the very next action that has to be performed? What are the bottlenecks that are out there that have to be, what's the action that has to be overcome to eliminate that bottleneck? If everything is kind of broken down to what is that next action, then your brain can get around that, and you can just sort of keep plugging away at that activity. So I tend to think one of the biggest, most important themes in time management, in productivity, is to be thinking about what is that next action, because then your brain can get a handle on the big giant project. So, for example, I probably have 40 projects on my project list. Nothing on those 40 projects will ever happen if I don't know what the next action on each of those projects is. If I know the next little thing I have to do, that I can constantly keep taking action on those things. So I feel like this was a very poor explanation, but what I've come to conclude is that, and going back to my house analogy earlier, as soon as I finish whatever that thing is I've got to get done and the project as a whole is not completed, I want to, before I move on to the next thing, figure out what the next step is, the next action that I have to take. I personally will log it in Service Autopilot or in Trello. Those are two tools that I use. And I'll log what my next action is. That way, next time I have a moment or next time I'm back on that project, all I have to do is look and see what my next action is. I've already figured it out. And then I do it, and then I figure out what my next one is. And so I would also say that if you are doing a lot of project-based work, really look at agile program. There's a project management concept called agile. It's in the development world, but look at it for your entire business. And there's a concept called a scrum. Look at that for your entire business. Those are both concepts used in technology, but you can apply those to every single element of your entire business. They've been pretty impactful. We had sort of practiced them, but not really. And we hired a guy that a guy that was a high-level CTO to come in and just, tell us what else we could do based on his years and years and years of experience. Look at what we can do, where we can improve. And that was a piece of advice we had got from him, and we've really become methodical about implementing in our business. And it's made a big difference. And then you take that same concept down to your personal self, and you manage yourself at that same level, and it'll make a huge difference on productivity.
You mentioned a couple great tools there. What are some other tools that you would recommend that our listeners check out? Maybe software, maybe services. What else would you recommend to our listeners?
My favorites are Trello. I wish I owned that product. That's an awesome product. Trello, Jing, Jing, fantastic product for recording 5 minutes of audio, video, and it produces a link, and you can email it to anybody, and they can watch it. Vocaroo, I love Vocaroo. It's a little free program where you can just you just click a button, it records your audio, gives you an email link, and you can email that audio to anybody. About.me is a great little free tool. We use LogMe and Rescue more, but About.me is a great tool to just share your screen real quick with somebody. So I'd say those are 4 of my tops. So again, Trello, Jing, Vocaroo, and I said About.me. I'm sorry. I meant Join.me, Join.me.
Let's talk books. What books would you recommend that every hungry entrepreneur read?
There's a lot. I would read Dan Kennedy's books along the lines of No BS Marketing, No BS, I don't remember the exact titles, No BS Direct Marketing, No BS Time Management, basically any of his business marketing. All his books are business marketing themed, but some of his no BS business, no BS marketing type books, really read all of them. But if you're going to start somewhere, start with those 2. I would read Chet Holmes' book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. Absolutely would read. That's one of my favorite books. I've read it a couple times. So I'm about to go through it again. I would read Influence by, do you say it Cialdini?
That's correct.
So I would read Influence. If you can't get an audio book of it, so if you are just determined to get an audio book, then read the book Yes. There's a little bit more to that title, but he was involved in the writing of that book. That book you can get on audio. A book that I read recently that I don't know if I'll put it on my all-time list, but it's definitely made it on my list of books in the last couple years. It's the only book I've ever read by him, but it's really good. Dave Ramsey wrote a book called Entree Leadership. That one comes to mind. That was a solid book. I've only read it once. I'm going to go through it again. There's a lot of just good business advice, and that's a guy that's built a ridiculously successful company. I've never been through any of his other, financial peace books, but this one he has on business. It's about business called Entree Leadership. I'd recommend reading that book. There's a lot of good tips in there.
Where do you see Service Autopilot in the next 10 years?
Vastly bigger than it is today. With what I see is that you will very clearly be able to look at a number of industries and say they were different prior to Service Autopilot, and today they're different industries. And the new guys will never be able to put their finger on it. It's like I say, the new guy that starts directly with Service Autopilot, and he never had to use other software solutions. He has no appreciation of, and it's perfectly fine, but he has no appreciation of what we've built compared to what everybody else had. And so for many, they'll never know the difference, but I believe that you will look at industries and the way they think, and I'm focused specifically on field service. So I believe the way that they look, act, talk, market, and run their companies will be different. And we're not going to change all of them, but we're going to have a huge impact on a number of them.
Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us today. What is the one thing our listeners should implement today after they're done listening to this podcast?
I would immediately start educating your clients. I would see yourself as an educator, and I would think about it this way. No matter what business, no matter what industry you're in, you are thinking about this thing every day, every waking moment. When you go to sleep, you're thinking about this. Think back to when you started this thing, or maybe before you started it, whatever your business is today, when you first went to work for somebody else and you were doing whatever it is that you've now created a business doing, remember how little you knew. And you had to learn the industry, you had to learn the nuances of the business, you had to learn all the technical stuff of the business. And now fast forward to where you are today, you know so much. You don't even know how much you didn't know at one point in time. And so when you're speaking with your clients, when you're marketing to your clients, when you're providing customer service, when you are welcoming them into your company and impressing them in the first 90 days of becoming a new client, remember how little you knew, how little they know about you, how infrequently they think about you. Whatever that services or product that you're selling them, you know so much about it and they know so little. They don't know why they need it at the level that you understand. There's just so much that you know that they don't know. And I know I've said that several times, but it's critical to grasp that concept that, again, you know so much they don't know. And so your job is to educate them. If you want to do a price increase, if you want to sell them something, if you want them to change the way they do something, you have to tell them why. And you have to tell them why it matters to them and why it will change something in their life and make something about their life better. And you have to do it from a position of realizing that they don't know what you know, and they don't have to think about the stuff you think about every day. They're just buying your thing, and then they have to go on with the rest of their life. So education, you start it today, and you start it with your clients, and then you do it with your team.
Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
And with that, this is Andrew Potoshnik with Love, Life, and Profit, signing off. Have a great day.
Need help building a lifestyle business you'd love? Visit lovelifeandprofit.com today, helping lifestyle entrepreneurs get more freedom and more profits since 1865.